buried with Jason has been reborn. Friday the 13th, Part 5. A New Beginning. Rated R.
Starts Friday at the Lyons Avenue and East Sprague Cinemas.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1985 slasher sequel, Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. Now, before I get into talking about this film, I want to talk about this film's advertising, which I honestly feel sucks. I mean, first off, you have this poster, which is horribly misleading. This kid is nowhere to be found in this movie, and it also makes you think that a young Tommy Jarvis is the killer. That's not the case at all. If that isn't bad enough, then you have the other alternate theatrical poster, which is just the film's title and the tagline on some really lazy red and black background. And then the best bit of artwork is the one that was used for the home video release with the glowing Jason mask with the red eyes, which this promo lamp is definitely inspired by. And even that has its issues, because it makes the film look like it stars Humongous from The Road Warrior. This time, he's not out for gas. He's out for blood. They should have just walked away. So, yeah. This film has some questionable advertising. And it's fitting, because this film has questionable writing, and questionable characters, and a questionable tone. And pretty much everything about it is questionable. I know this has its fans, and I think that's great and that's wonderful. I do like some aspects of this movie, but for me personally, this is one of the weakest entries in the series. At this point, you could tell that there were cracks starting to show in the franchise, and the producers and writers were just throwing shit at a wall and hoping it stuck. And it's something that I can understand why, because you're in the 5th installment of a franchise that I don't really think they initially intended was going to last this long. But that doesn't mean you have to half-ass things so much. And that's what's so frustrating about this film, is that there's potential here with this idea of a whodunit centered around a new Jason who's shown up and taken a hockey mask and started to kill more teenagers, but it never really lives up to its full potential. So the film is directed by Danny Steinmann, who prior to this directed a ton of porno, and you can tell, because this movie has a ton of nudity in it. This is arguably the film that has the most nudity in the entire franchise, and it's nice nudity. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some epic pairs of tits that are in this film. Deborah Voorhees has the most legendary pair, but it's one of those films where you can tell in these scenes, and you can tell in other sequences when it comes to how Danny approaches the acting or the setup of his shots, that this is a guy who's directed a lot of porno. And he's also a guy who has more of a history with exploitation films. I mean, prior to this, he directed Savage Streets, and that's a pure exploitation film. And I like Savage Streets. But I don't feel that approach works well with this franchise. I think your enjoyment of this movie really comes down to whether or not you buy the whole idea of Jason not being the killer, and whether or not you like the sleazier exploitation approach. And I don't really care for it. I don't think it works with this series. It causes some really bad tonal shifts. And it's not only with the screenplay, but it's also with the visuals, because of how rough and raw a lot of Steinmann's directing is. There are a lot of shots here that are rough like sandpaper, and some of them work, like when this guy gets killed with a strap to the face. But there's other times when this rough like sandpaper directing holds the film back visually and makes it look cheap and rushed. I'm not going to say that Steinmann is a terrible director because he's done some decent work in the past. And there are some solid shots here, like the nightmare sequence in the beginning where Tommy Jarvis has a nightmare about Jason rising from the grave, and the various different other sequences when Tommy hallucinates that Jason is there in the same room with him, or some of the sequences in the climax that feature some nice bits of mood and atmosphere. But I still feel that this film definitely looks like a rushed, cheap production. And a big part of that is due to Steinmann's direction. He's not a director that really has a peak that is above average. His peak is average. And when your peak is average, if you're not consistently hitting that average peak, then you have many moments where the direction is below that. And it hurts the film. And I think some of those things are not necessarily 100% his fault, because I think a good number of the kills were censored by the MPAA. But even those scenes, the way that they're shot, they lack a certain dynamic. They lack a lot of creativity in terms of the way that they're shot. It's just a film that, from a directing standpoint, is not nearly as noteworthy as some of the other films in the franchise. The screenplay by Martin Kratosser and David Cohen, though, that's the one that I feel should have been tossed and should have had another rewrite. Because this film has a really bad sense of tone. So there are times where it's trying to be goofy and silly with lines of dialogue with characters like Ethelwyn Jr., which I know have their fans. I hate those characters. I didn't like them at all. They weren't likable. They weren't funny to me. Just because Ethel's going around swearing like a sailor, that doesn't mean that she's funny. I didn't care for those characters at all. Especially Junior. He was just an obnoxious fucking prick. And this is an issue that the film has throughout the screenplay. You have these characters that stick out like sore thumbs in terms of their personalities, that don't work well with the rest of the cast. Then you have a bigger cast of characters, but because there's more people, there's less time for character development. There's less time for depth. So you just have a lot of cannon fodder. You have a lot of characters I don't give two shits about whether they live or die. And the characters that have the most potential, they really aren't on the screen that much. Because you have all these other characters, or they aren't given the best treatment with the screenplay. For instance, Tommy Jarvis could be a strong character if there were moments where he broke out of his shell more. Like the scene where he messes around with Reggie and pranks him. But other than that scene, you don't really see many other moments where he lets his guard down. He's too withdrawn. He's too inside his shell. So as a result, he's a dull lead because there's not much for him to do. You can have him do the kung fu, you can have him kick some ass, but that's only a fleeting amount of interest for me. I really would have liked to have seen at least a couple scenes where he breaks out of his shell more, develops more of a relationship with some of the other characters. And other than Reggie the Reckless, these characters sucked. I didn't care about any of them. I didn't care. I mean, Deborah Voorhees is a great pair of tits, but they didn't do much to really make her stand out, except that she's just into having sex with this other guy. You have more characters here, but that doesn't make things better just because you have a bigger body count due to a surplus of teenagers. And then you have the whole thing with Jason, which of course isn't really Jason. And I feel that that was just handled poorly. You have this whodunit thing, and once again, it's predictable. It's not handled well. It's not well thought out. Why did they not take advice from the first movie and do better is beyond me. They just were lazy. They were just like, it's just a paramedic. And it doesn't make any sense because in the climax, he got hit with a front loader in the chest and kept on coming. Then he got a chainsaw to the arm and kept on coming. He was taking hits that Jason took in the other films, but it made more sense because Jason is technically a mutant when you think about it. He's got some superhuman abilities. But this guy's just a regular guy. Who cares if he's mad? Okay, he's mad and he's gone crazy. All right. But that doesn't explain his ability to teleport like Jason does in his other movies. It doesn't explain why he has the ability to take as much punishment as Jason did in the other films. If they showed him shooting himself up with adrenaline shots, that would be one thing. But they never do. He just gets hit with a front loader in the chest, which should kill anybody, kill any normal person, and, oh, I'm still alive. I'm going to grab your arm, grab your leg, and then I'm going to chase after you some more. It's just like, how does this guy keep on ticking? He's just a normal guy. Did he get possessed by Jason's spirit? No, they don't even tie that in there. They could have done that. It would have made sense then. Jason possessed his body, and Jason is the one that's responsible for why he's able to take so much punishment. Nope. They don't provide any explanation for it. And then the reason why this killing spree even happens is so stupid. The only reason why this whole massive string of murders occurs is because this halfway house for troubled, mentally ill teenagers is led by a guy who's so fucking stupid that he would give a teen who looks like he's the brother of the Night Slasher from Cobra a fucking axe to chop some wood. So when one of the teens, this annoying fat fuck who's into candy bars, just does not leave him alone, it sends this guy over the edge, and this guy kills the fat kid, and because the fat kid was the son of the paramedic Roy, he goes on a rampage. It's one of those things that's like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, even for this franchise, this is so dumb. They put zero thought into this script, and it shows. I just can't get my head around that. Like, why the fuck would you give that guy an axe? He not only looks like he would be the Night Slasher's brother, he looks like he could be the Night Slasher. Why the fuck would you give him an axe? And it's just one of those movies where I just don't get into the story because these characters, for the most part, other than Reggie and some aspects of Tommy, suck. Or you have characters that are just adequate at best. I mean, Pam Roberts, she just seemed like she was a combination of all the other Final Girls, and then they forgot to give her a personality. There was really no scenes for her to really showcase a personality. There wasn't anything in the script for her to really show anything unique in terms of what she could bring to the table. She was effective when it comes to fighting Jason, but that's really about it. The best character is Reggie, and he's a kid. The other characters just boring, lame, useless teenage cannon fodder. Now, when it comes to the kills, it does deliver in some areas. I will give it that. There's a road flare death, which is pretty unique and different. There is the strap kill where the guy gets killed with a strap to the face. But then there's a lot of other kills that are just really generic, bland, and boring. It's just Jason stabbing people with a machete numerous times. And there's a lot of cutaways that really are disappointing, and it's not necessarily entirely the fault of the filmmakers or the writers because the MPA are a bunch of assholes, but it's still something that the film does suffer from. a lot of cutaways or a lot of aftermath shots. And as a result, the kills don't really have the same impact as other films in the franchise do, especially the final chapter. So yeah, it has some decent kills, but a lot of them are just not really anything that special. So even in that regard, it's disappointing. And the acting, it's there. I mean, I'm not asking for Oscar-worthy performances in a Friday the 13th film, but other than a few names, a lot of the performances are really not that great. I will say this, John Shepherd, he was fantastic. That's what makes this film even more frustrating, is that this character wasn't written better and didn't have more moments for him to break out of his shell and make this character more dynamic. But what we did get was quite good. I thought he did a great job playing the mentally troubled and distraught Tommy Jarvis. Melanie Kinnaman as Pam, like I said, she handled herself well physically, but there wasn't really much for her to do with the screenplay and with what she had to work with in terms of making this a more memorable character. Um, Corey Feldman has a bit of a cameo role as young Tommy in the beginning, does well with what he's asked to do, but he's only in it for a little bit. Shavar Ross, I really liked as Reggie. He had a precocious personality. He handled his own well. He had more of a interesting dynamic with the other characters. Overall, I really liked the kid. I thought the kid did a great job. I thought he was the best character. Um, Richard Young as Dr. Matthew Letter, like this guy was, he just seemed like he was there because, hey, we need to have a guy who runs the halfway house, but you never really got to know the guy that well. And then by the point you could maybe see him do something more interesting, he gets killed. So whatever. That guy though is played by an actor that did a really good job playing a dirty cop in An Innocent Man. So Richard Young, I got to give him a lot of credit for uh, going on to do that role later on, because I absolutely hated that guy. I wanted to kick the shit out of him. So it was really honestly interesting to see him play what is a good guy, really, versus what I remember him for. Um, Dick Wieand is Roy Burns. This is a guy who you could tell is probably going to be the killer. So, I mean, they did what they could there, but you could really tell that, all right, this guy's more than likely going to be the killer here. The rest of the cast, just, I mean, you've got Carol Locatell as Ethel, and this other guy played Ron Sloan as Junior. You got Tiffany Helm as Violet. She had a nice look to her, punk look, but the character wasn't much. I like the song that was playing during her death scene, His Eyes by Pseudo Echo. There's a sheriff character they keep cutting back to, who's just your typical generic sheriff of a small town. Um, you got Vernon Washington, who plays George Winter, who is Reggie's grandfather. I liked his scenes. I thought he did a good job. Um, you got John Robert Dixon as Eddie. You've got Miguel and Nunez Jr. as Demon. I really liked Miguel and Nunez Jr.'s character. Oh, those damn enchiladas. I wish he was in it more. Film would have been better if that was the case. And honestly, I just feel that the film would have been better, period, if you had less characters and a more simpler approach to things. Tom Morga played the guy behind the Jason mask during the Jason sequences, and he was good. I thought he did a good job with his stunts and things like that. Um, the Jason mask has a new look to it. It's got blue triangles and stripes on it instead of red to make it different from Jason's normal mask that he uses. But when it comes to the screenplay, I just would have liked to have had a better approach to the whodunit angle, and just a simpler story overall. Have things take place 20 years after the events of the first 4 films. Tommy Jarvis is grown up. Make it so he's not completely mad and crazy and a guy who's jumped from one asylum to the next. Just make it so he's a guy who's found uh, a lot of close friends, but he has issues with certain fears, and one of them is tied into Jason Voorhees. That's the main one. And so his friends decide to take him on a road trip, and they go and stay at a cabin by Camp Crystal Lake to try to help him face his fears. And then these characters start getting killed off one by one in various different gory ways. And then it becomes a whodunit. And it's one of those who's the killer. They throw in red herrings, they throw in things to try to make you go on this path, but then they go in a different direction, and they mess around with your brain in the way that a lot of other whodunit films do. And I think having things be more simple, having things focus more on character development and what has happened with Crystal Lake and what has happened with this town and with these denizens and members of the town after all these years is more interesting to me than just more teenagers and more deaths and a Scooby-Doo-esque twist at the end. So it's just one of those things where I would have preferred that, a more simpler approach. I don't know exactly who the killer would be and how they would handle things, but if they put some more thought into it, they put their brains together and brainstorm, they would be able to figure something out. Now, there are some other aspects of this film that I want to mention. For one, Harry Manfredini's score. I think this is one of his most underrated scores, because I really like the new theme that he creates for this. This is the first time in the entire franchise where the score sounds considerably different than the other films in the series. And I like that it is so different. I like this score. It is well edited by Bruce Green, cinematography by Stephen L. Posey. It's okay, it's adequate. It's nothing amazing, but it works well enough. And for a film that's only an hour and like 30 something minutes, it still has some pacing issues, because I just find myself drifting in and out with this movie because I don't really care for most of the characters. There's not enough with Pam for me to really care. Tommy Jarvis, he never really breaks out of his shell enough, and there's a good chunk of the movie where he's just gone, so that doesn't help. And you're left with a lot of really bland cannon fodder characters. And the only one that really stands out is Reggie. And if it wasn't for him, I'd be bored out of my fucking skull, to be perfectly honest. And the intermittent bits of nudity. So as a slasher, it's not really that satisfying when it comes to the kills, because the MPA butchered everything. When it comes to the story, it's not very satisfying because it's not handled that well, and it's inconsistent in various different areas. And character-wise, it's not that satisfying either, because there's not a good number of characters that have a dynamic or a chemistry that you really like, and the ones that show potential either aren't handled that well or are just killed off. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the film. Oh yeah, the ending. I hate the ending too. I hate this stupid twist ending where Tommy's the killer. I mean, a lot of other people have pointed this out, but it should be repeated. It's so fucking stupid. I mean, why the hell would a hospital let a patient keep a hockey mask, which should be in an evidence locker, and a knife in their bedside table. I mean, what? I mean, it was a dream sequence. It had to be. But it was such a clunky, poorly handled dream sequence because it's trying to do like a twist within a twist, but then like the way that it's handled is so shitty because, oh, Jarvis sees Jason. Oh, it seems like Jason might be back. Oh, then he grabs a hockey mask, or he looks at the hockey mask in his drawer with the knife, and it tries to set it up as if he's escaped. How did he escape for 1, 2? How the hell did he break through the window? Like, these windows are probably really strong to prevent something like that from happening. So he broke through the window, and then he did it as a distraction? Just so Pam would come along, and then he would try to kill her? Like, what? I don't... It's just such a half-assed twist. Fitting for, honestly, a half-assed sequel. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. This is one of those movies where I think your mileage will vary. I think some people will get a kick out of it. Some people will enjoy it for what it is. And for other people, it's just not really gonna click. And I'm one of those people. I've tried to give it numerous chances, and each time it just doesn't work for me. But anyway, thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.